Hello, dear viewers. We present to you an incredible story that will change your perception of space travel forever. An American crew of astronauts embarked on a journey to an uncharted planet full of mysteries and dangers. But what they discovered there surpassed all their expectations. They encountered futuristic warriors clad in powerful exoskeletons, ready to defend their territory. The crew was on the verge of defeat when one brave warrior from their team turned the tide of battle. How could this happen? How did they survive? And what awaited them next? Find out everything in this thrilling adventure. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with new stories. And now, answer this. What would you do if you were in the place of these astronauts? For a long time, humanity has dreamed of conquering new worlds. At last, it became possible. A team of 5 experienced astronauts, led by Captain Jason Raven, was assigned a mission to a planet with the code name Alpha 7. This planet was located at the edge of the galaxy, and its exploration was one of the most important missions in NASA's history. Each member of the crew had been carefully selected. Their skills, physical training, and psychological resilience made them ideal candidates for this challenging task. When the ship entered orbit around Alpha 7, the first data was encouraging. The atmosphere was breathable, radiation levels were safe, and the surface seemed suitable for research. However, the deeper the astronauts delved into their investigations, the more apparent it became that Alpha 7 held many secrets. Everywhere they found strange structures that couldn't have been created under local conditions. These were traces of a civilization far more advanced than humanity. Shortly after landing, the crew began making contact with the inhabitants of the planet. Their radar detected movement several kilometers from the base. When the astronauts headed there, they were met with an astonishing sight. Before them stood tall, muscular beings clad in powerful exoskeletons. These warriors, as they later discovered, were the protectors of the planet who considered the newcomers a threat. At first, contact was peaceful. The warriors appeared interested in the humans, but remained cautious. They used complex devices to transmit information, and although understanding their language was difficult, it was clear they were trying to explain their point of view. However, when the astronauts started taking photos and recording data about the planet, the warriors felt threatened and tension between both sides began to rise. One day, during another expedition, the astronauts accidentally violated boundaries that the warriors considered sacred. This provoked a furious reaction. The warriors surrounded the base, and their exoskeletons, equipped with powerful weapons, were intimidating. The situation was spiraling out of control. Captain Raven tried to negotiate, but his efforts were futile. The warriors were resolute, and soon a real battle began. The astronauts fought back using all their equipment, but the forces were unequal. The future warriors were not only stronger, but also better armed. The battle lasted for hours. Every astronaut was wounded, and their morale was fading. They were on the brink of surrender, sensing that their end was near. At this moment, Captain Raven realized he needed to find a way out. He knew surrender meant death for the entire crew, but what else could be done? During one crucial moment of the battle, when all seemed hopeless, Captain Raven noticed that one of the warriors, dressed in an exoskeleton, was acting differently. This warrior was older than the rest, and his movements were slower, as if he was thinking about his actions. Suddenly, he stepped back and removed his helmet. Beneath it was a human, though with altered facial features. He was clearly of the human race. His eyes glowed with intelligence and understanding. The warrior, introducing himself as Kyle, addressed Captain Raven. He spoke English, albeit with a slightly different accent. Kyle explained that he was one of the first colonists who had arrived on Alpha 7 centuries ago. They had built this civilization, but over time it had changed, and many had forgotten their past. Now, Kyle wanted to help the astronauts to prevent further bloodshed. Kyle helped the astronauts understand that the warriors they were fighting were not just defenders of the planet, they were its guardians. They believed the astronauts had come to take over the planet's resources and therefore saw them as a threat. However, Kyle convinced his comrades that the astronauts had come in peace. Together, they managed to negotiate a truce and began working on a plan that would allow both sides to coexist peacefully. Kyle told the astronauts about a technology that could strengthen the connection between the two civilizations. This technology allowed for the creation of portals capable of connecting different points in space and time. The astronauts were amazed to learn such a possibility existed. Kyle proposed using the portal to establish a permanent communication channel between their base and the planet to prevent future conflicts. Kyle showed the astronauts how the portals worked. It was something completely new to them. Portals were energy gates that could connect any points in space and time. Kyle explained that this technology was developed by their ancestors to facilitate travel between planets and even across different eras. He also demonstrated how portals could be used for rapid movement across the planet and protection against external threats. The astronauts were impressed, yet slightly frightened. They understood that this technology could be the key to their survival, but also feared it might be used against them. Kyle assured them they could trust him and that he would help them adapt to the new living conditions on Alpha 7. He also offered to train the astronauts in portal use so they could utilize them for their research and protection. Kyle began training the astronauts in portal operation. It was a complex and fascinating process. Each member of the crew learned to create and control portals for their own needs. They began using portals for quick travel across the planet to explore new areas and gather information about its nature. They also used portals to protect their base by creating temporary barriers that could stop any attack. Kyle also taught the astronauts how to use portals for exchanging information with other planets. They started setting up permanent communication channels that allowed them to talk with colleagues on Earth and with other research teams across the galaxy. This gave the astronauts the ability to coordinate their operations and receive additional support when necessary. Gradually, the astronauts began to realize that Alpha 7 held many secrets. They discovered ancient cities abandoned thousands of years ago and mysterious devices that couldn't have been created under local conditions. These discoveries made the astronauts wonder who could have built this civilization and why it had disappeared. Kyle explained that his ancestors were colonists who had arrived on the planet centuries ago, but over time, they faced problems that led to their disappearance. Kyle told the astronauts that his ancestors faced a resource crisis that led to internal conflicts and wars. These events resulted in the deaths of most of the population, forcing the survivors to leave the planet. He also told them that his ancestors left behind many devices and technologies that could aid new arrivals, but which required special preparation to operate safely. The astronauts continued their research, using portals for fast travel across the planet. They discovered ancient cities abandoned thousands of years ago and mysterious artifacts that couldn't have been made under local conditions. These findings made the astronauts question who could have built this civilization and why it vanished. Kyle explained that his ancestors were early colonists who had arrived on Alpha 7 many centuries ago, but eventually faced challenges that led to their downfall. He told the astronauts that his ancestors suffered through a devastating resource crisis that triggered internal warfare. As a result, much of the population perished, and the survivors were forced to abandon the planet. Kyle also shared that his ancestors left behind numerous devices and advanced technologies that could assist future visitors, but which required specialized knowledge to safely operate. Although the astronauts and Kyle began working together, this did not mean that all problems had been solved. The warriors who had previously fought against the astronauts remained cautious. They did not fully trust the astronauts and did not always agree with their decisions. This created tension in the relations between the two sides and sometimes led to conflicts. In addition, the astronauts faced difficulties adapting to the new living conditions on Alpha 7. The planet was harsh and required significant effort from the astronauts to survive. They had to learn how to use local resources and develop new technologies to ensure their comfort and safety. It was a difficult task, but the astronauts were ready to face these challenges. Despite Kyle's help in establishing contact with the warriors, their attitude toward the astronauts remained suspicious. The warriors were convinced that the astronauts had come to seize the planet's resources. They were unwilling to allow this, even if it meant continuing the conflict. Every time the astronauts tried to conduct new research, the warriors blocked access to the most important locations. This caused constant conflicts and tension. Captain Raven understood that they needed to find a way to earn the warriors' trust. He proposed organizing joint expeditions to demonstrate that the astronauts had truly arrived with peaceful intentions. The warriors agreed, but only under the condition that the astronauts would follow their rules and restrictions. It wasn't an easy compromise, but Captain Raven knew it was the only way to overcome distrust and establish normal relations. The first joint expedition took place several days after the negotiations began. Kyle and a few warriors joined the astronauts. They headed toward one of the most mysterious zones on the planet, where traces of an ancient civilization had previously been discovered. The warriors remained alert, but Kyle assured them that the astronauts meant no harm. Every step was carefully planned to show the warriors that the astronauts had indeed come in peace. On their way to the ancient city, they encountered many mysterious devices and technologies. Kyle explained that these devices were part of a defense system activated when outsiders approached. The warriors, using their exoskeletons, helped the astronauts disable these mechanisms, significantly speeding up the research process. Soon, they reached the ancient city, which had been abandoned for centuries. The ancient city was a marvel, preserved almost in its original state. Towering buildings adorned with intricate carvings and symbols rose above the landscape. The team was stunned by the advanced technology evident in every structure. From energy conduits to automated defense systems, everything suggested that this civilization had been far ahead of its time. As they explored deeper into the city, they discovered ancient texts and data storage devices containing information about the planet's history and the thriving civilization that once inhabited it. Of particular interest was a temple-like building at the city's center, which appeared to be its heart. Inside, they found a series of holographic displays and interactive interfaces offering detailed information about the planet's resources and the technologies used by its ancient inhabitants. One display especially caught their attention. It showed a map of the entire galaxy, with marked points indicating potential targets for exploration or colonization. This discovery implied that the civilization had been part of a larger interstellar network, possibly even extending beyond their own galaxy. Venturing deeper into the temple, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber filled with artifacts and relics from various eras of the planet's history. Among these treasures were advanced medical devices, communication tools, and even experimental weapons. These items pointed to the highly developed nature of the civilization and the depth of their knowledge. After weeks of intense research and discoveries, the team prepared to return to Earth. They had gathered an unprecedented amount of data and artifacts that would revolutionize humanity's understanding of space travel and extraterrestrial civilizations. However, before departure, they needed to ensure that relations between humans and the native warriors remained stable. Captain Raven proposed establishing a permanent communications link through one of the portals, allowing both sides to stay connected and exchange information. With Kale's help, they successfully set up a secure portal near the base camp, directly linked to a similar portal on Earth. This channel provided not only continuous communication but also the possibility of future collaboration. As the team prepared to board the ship, they reflected on the incredible journey and the new beginning it had opened for humanity. Ultimately, the mission to planet Alpha 7 turned out to be much more than just a scientific expedition. It was a transformative experience that changed the course of human history. The discovery of advanced alien technology and the establishment of peace with another intelligent civilization opened up new possibilities for mankind. The lessons learned during this mission would guide future explorations and interactions with other civilizations across the universe. As the ship left the orbit of Alpha 7, The crew looked down at the planet with a mix of awe and reverence. They knew that their journey was only beginning and that the future held infinite possibilities for discovery and cooperation. And as they headed back to Earth, they couldn't help but wonder what other mysteries awaited them in the vast expanses of space. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow new stories. Now tell us, what would you do if you were in the place of those astronauts?